indoor arena in all of Europe. The time was 10:40 p.m. or so, British summer time. A large explosion heard in around the foyer of this arena, right about the ticket office where the largest number of people would come and go. In the arena at the time, the emergency services began arriving, but in the arena at the time, after this noise was heard, they came on the overhead speakers. Ariana Grande's concert had just ended, and said that they believed that balloons had popped. There were a lot of pink balloons at this concert. They were part of the stagecraft. They told concert goers that the balloons had popped and that chairs had fallen, and that they believed there was nothing to worry about. That was in the early going. They did not realize at the time what had happened at the entrance. There were a lot of people out front, parents who had waited to come pick up their children. Thousands of young girls, as it's been described to us, had come to this concert unaccompanied. And you see all the pink balloons in there. Hundreds of people were leaving. The last song was happening, and that 5% or so that leave a concert as it's ending to try to get ahead of the traffic, they were leaving, and there were parents outside, and at that moment there was an explosion right at the entrance to this place. And before it was all over, emergency service confirmed 19 people dead, more than 50 injured, as Tucker just mentioned. We are now waiting for a news conference that we're expecting to come from authorities in London to give us the latest on this. They shut down the train stations and have put a large cordon around the area. I want to show you the first video that we have from outside. I want to tell you about what you're about to see. It's a dash cam video from inside, maybe a police car, we're not sure, but it's looking at a brick building. To the left, in a darkened area, will be the arena itself. You'll hear a car radio playing with music, and then you'll see a flash on the left side of your screen, then hear a noise, then hear the man inside the car. Let's listen. In the car.
No.
Realizing that something horrible had happened at that arena. And that, we believe, was the explosion. As it's been described to us, there was chaos inside that building. Children running for the exits, a mad scramble to get out the doors. Some of those doors blocked with people, some who had fallen and no doubt were injured in an attempt to exit. There were parents and others running into the building. They'd witnessed the explosion on the outside. They'd seen the bloodied people outside and the bodies, frankly, lying on this large entry area, huge concrete area, like might be outside any large basketball arena in the United States. Some live pictures coming to us from Sky News in the United Kingdom that show kind of the chaos coming in. These are the stairwells as people were exiting, trying to get to the train stations which were nearby, running down the stairs and hauling for the exits. As all of this was going on, we were getting reports. For instance, this one from the timing of the explosion is 30 hours after the president had issued his call against terrorism in the area as he was speaking in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And we were getting from different news organizations there information, for instance, from the BBC. One caller to the BBC, Emma Johnson, said that her husband and she were at the arena to pick up their daughters who were aged 15 and 17. She said, quote, "It was definitely a bomb. It was definitely in the foyer. We stood there at the top of the stairs and the glass exploded. It was near to where they were selling the merchandise." So the concert, the T-shirts and all the rest that go along with something like that. Quoting now, "The whole building shook. There was a blast and then a flash of fire afterwards. We obviously then run to try to find our children. And fortunately for us, they were safe to tell the story." Hundreds of hotels now offering beds and respite for these kids and others who were trying to escape. Locals allowing people to come into their homes. We've gotten other information from police saying that there was a second bag of clothing that I mentioned a short time ago on Tucker Carlson's program that they blew up. This one witness speaking to the BBC said it was like something out of a war film. He said he was thrown to the ground by the force of the explosion as he waited near the foyer, the entrance to the arena, waiting for his daughter and wife. Quoting, "When I got up and looked around, there were bodies everywhere. I reckon 20 to 30 bodies. I can't say if some of them were dead, but they'd all looked dead. They were covered in blood and were really seriously hurt. The first thing I did was I ran into the arena trying to find my family. I couldn't find them, so I pulled back to where everybody was injured to physically look at the people to see if it was my family. At the same time, I started helping the emergency services as best I could while trying to get a hold of my family. He eventually found his family, says the BBC, who were safe, but said that there were, quote, kids and teenagers just lying there and screaming. We're getting new reports in from Sky News as they're reporting live at 5 minutes past 2 in the morning. Let's listen.
Prime Minister Theresa May was hoping to win a majority, if not a large one. And already we have had condemnation and condolences from party leaders.
From party leaders and politicians. Jeremy Corbyn was one of the first to tweet about this, offering his condolences and certainly his thoughts with all those affected. The local politicians, mayors and councillors, they've been tweeting about this tonight. Paris, a city which knows all about terrorist attacks, offering support to Manchester. Again, the similarities there. We were talking earlier about music halls being targeted. That seems to have been the case again tonight. The Bataclan in Paris, another popular music venue, with a significantly older crowd. But this, the people who have carried out this attack, if it is proven to be a terrorist attack, which the Greater Manchester Police are treating it as such, they would have known the sort of people here who would have been attending. We're talking about 21,000 people packed inside this auditorium or this concert venue, and most of them would have been young girls. And the witnesses you've been talking to tonight, there was that extremely fortunate mother who left the venue early with her daughter. It was her first concert and she left early. And then we've seen on that dash cam footage from a car which wasn't even close by. You heard the sound, and that would give you a real indication of the size of the explosion. And the American networks have been ahead really of their British counterparts. They reported the numbers very early on. We didn't. We waited for confirmation from the Greater Manchester Police, and the American network said between 19 and 20 people killed within about an hour and a half. And you would expect some intelligence sharing to go on between the British police and the terrorism counter-terrorism forces in this country, sharing information with the Americans, but certainly they've been ahead of it. Los Angeles Times is saying now officially that it was a suicide bomber. That has not come from any UK agency, but certainly if they are being given information by the American counter-terrorism agencies, they seem to have got it right this evening.
And Reuters is now saying, rather quoting two unnamed US officials, that a suicide bomber is suspected of carrying out this blast. The mayor for Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, recently elected, obviously back in May. My heart goes out to families who have lost loved ones. My admiration.
And further of that reporting for the United States, we were sort of ahead of the game here, or ahead of the reporting in the United States, and realized early that this had been a terror attack. It is authorities who are being quoted, multiple authorities here in the U.S. by the Los Angeles Times, saying that this was a suicide bomber, and that's been the thinking from the beginning. As you probably know, in arenas like this in the United Kingdom, they don't have trash receptacles. There are no trash cans. There's not really a place to put things like this. That dates back to the IRA attacks that have been going on did go on for 20 years. You don't find a lot of trash receptacles over there for this very reason. So instead, it's believed this was a suicide bomber. Authorities got there and saw the remains of people and suggested to them that in fact this had been a suicide bomber. The latest from the hospitals, the vast majority of those people who have been taken to hospital suffered shrapnel wounds, which suggests there may have been nails in this suicide bomb if it proves to be that, and that these shrapnel wounds were similar to war wounds. As the metal would heat in the explosion of the detonation of the explosion, the nails would melt down. It looked like shrapnel inside and onto people's bodies. The death count at 19 and the injury count at 50, though we believe the injury count will go up because those are just people who have been admitted to hospitals. Quoting from the LA Times, everyone stopped and all talking stopped, said Charlotte from Manchester, who wrote a direct message on Twitter. Then she saw people running out of the exits, quoting, everybody was running and screaming. People were screaming, evacuate. Another from the LA Times, and quoting, Laura Sanders was near the stage when she heard an explosion. She's 15 years old. It seemed to come from near the entrance of the theater. where the audience had streamed toward the exits perhaps 2 minutes after Ariana Grande left the stage. Quoting now, then everyone who was leaving started screaming and running the other way toward the exit, she wrote in a DM. A huge Ariana Grande fan, she'd come to the concert with her mother. Quoting again, I grabbed my mom's hand and I started running, following a lot of others toward the exit. And outside, police were everywhere trying to clear the area, she said. Another witness, Matt Ledger, who was there with 2 of his friends, he's 19 years old. He said, everyone started sprinting and grabbing each other. He said in a phone interview, and quoting, when I got outside, I saw a few people lying on the grass and their heads were bleeding. Others report of seeing multiple bodies outside. This comes to us from the Daily Mail. The blood, the sound of body parts, it will never leave my mind, said a witness of the horrific scenes at the Manchester Arena. Let's go, new video from outside the hospital now. This is some video from just a short time ago, if we could roll that. These are victims being brought into the hospital. And well, I guess we have that queued up just a little bit wrong, but victims going in there, and these are pictures from the scene. Abby Mullen from Airdire in North Lancashire, which is nearby, who was at the event, said, as we were leaving, a bomb or explosion went off just centimeters in front of me, she says. People's skin and faces were everywhere, including my hair and on my bag. I'm still finding bits of God knows what in my hair. You never ever expect these things to happen, but then it proves it can happen to anybody. Quoting that sound, the blood, and those who are running around clueless with body parts and bits of skin missing will not leave my mind anytime soon, or the minds of those involved. Sky News with Jason Farrell on scene. Let's listen.
They are talking about
What's he doing
shrapnel injuries. Sorry, come to me again, Anna.
Apologies, Jason. Yes, do continue. What were you saying?
Yeah, some of the people coming out of here I've spoken to who've been talking to loved ones inside the hospital. So I just spoke to 2 teenagers who came out with their mother. They'd gone to the concert with their grandfather, and their grandfather had been on the lower tier. They were on the upper tier, and there's a lot of emotion here, I have to say, and a lot of people are coming out. They're very sad at what's been going on. People have been coming out in tears with their families. But one pair of teenagers who came out with their mother, we spoke to. Their grandfather had been on the lower tier. He had been in the room when the explosion had happened. He had been hit. He had a wound to his face. He's staying in overnight. They've spoken to him. They say he is okay. They're obviously very shaken. They were able to get out pretty quickly. But the reports we're getting is of potentially forms of shrapnel from this explosion have been injuring people. With another report of someone who got shrapnel through their foot. And that does seem to be the case, as consistent with that kind of, but whether it's a nail bomb or just a bomb that has somehow created quite a lot of shrapnel, we don't know at this stage. But yeah, a lot of people are coming here. There's ambulances been coming in and out. Some families going home in taxis now, having perhaps gone in to see their loved ones. I've seen one individual on his phone still trying to actually work out the whereabouts of a friend, and you know, there's still a lot of confusion. This is still early days for some people. They don't yet know exactly what has happened to everybody.
Jason, we're just hearing that the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police, Ian Hopkins, is expected to give a statement on the steps of their headquarters at about 2:40, so less than half an hour, we understand, and no doubt they will give more details if they can. But this has real significance, doesn't it, for the cabinet members who may well need to attend an emergency cabinet meeting?
I should tell you, we're getting information from a deputy assistant to President Trump, Sebastian Gorka, who's tweeted that he does not believe it's a coincidence that tonight's situation in Manchester happened on the 22nd of May, because it was 4 years ago today that a British army soldier was killed by Muslim extremists in southeast London. 2 Muslim extremists ran Fusile Lee Rigby down in a car and then stabbed and attacked him to death with knives and a cleaver on May the 22nd, 2013. The tweet from Gorka is as follows: Manchester explosion happens on 4th anniversary of the public murder of Fusile Lee Rigby. Dates matter to jihadi terrorists. And over time, we have learned that they have. Jim Woolsey is with us. He's a former CIA director who's covered many items like this, sadly, and is live with us on set here tonight. Mr. Woolsey, your thoughts?
Well, things are kind of coming to a head. I think the radical Islamists, and I would call them that, have decided to pick up the pace with the terrorist attacks, and I think we'll probably see some more. And we now have a president who is pretty straightforward that he is at war with them. He's not going to soft pedal that. He calls them evil. And we haven't had a situation like that. We did not have, in the 8 years of the Obama administration, a president who wanted to fight and win a war.
President Obama fought a number of wars and certainly didn't say that he didn't want to win them.
Well, he didn't
it's
say
very
that he
early,
didn't want
Mr.
to win
Woolsey,
them,
with great respect. It's very early to make this a political matter.
He didn't say that he didn't want to win them, but I think that's the way he behaved. And it seems to me that's pretty straightforward.
We don't know what this is. We are led to believe by authorities in Manchester that this was a single person with a single bomb. They've not ascribed any motive to this, though there have been widespread reports of terror alerts across the region. It was 10 days ago that our U.S. State Department sent out a warning to Americans who were traveling in Europe to remain vigilant, to stay away from large gathering places where there'd be lots of tourists or big crowds. And tonight, on this May the 22nd, it's happened.
Well, the radical Islamists go this way. This is what they did in Boston at the marathon some 2-3 years ago. That was a commemoration of a date, the beginning of the American Revolution in Lexington and Concord. They had, this is similar to what happened at the discotheque in Paris some months back. They have, I think, decided to move out and pick up the pace, and it could be wrong. Maybe
it could be a lone wolf who's made a decision for his or her own reasons.
Right, but to kill all these other people, usually there's some ideology kicking around, and
that certainly could be true. And if I were a pundit on this stage, I could say, yeah, that's fine, but I'm not. And the news organization that is Fox News is reporting we don't know who this was, because at this point we can't.
It's sort of like saying, you know, the race is not always to the swift, but generally that's the way to bet. And here it may be something other than radical Islamist terrorism, but it looks pretty suspicious right now.
It certainly does look suspicious. Mr. Woolsey, it's very good of you. Thank you.
Sure.
So far, we're waiting for a live report from the authorities on scene. At this point, the authorities have said that they are treating this as a terror attack, and they are. Trace Gallagher with the latest as we have it from the authorities across the pond. Trace, to you.
A couple of things, Shep. We should note that Ariana Grande, as people have been talking to TMZ, apparently they're now reporting that she is thinking about canceling her show on Thursday night. That might have been a foregone conclusion. Again, this happened right at the end of her show. She's fine. She walked behind the curtain at about 10:35, and that's when the first calls started coming in about this explosion. As we were talking in the early stages of this, Shep, a couple of hours ago, it was very confusing for everybody, because everybody who was inside the arena who was streaming out kept saying that they heard something. They heard the explosion, they felt the explosion, but they didn't see anything. They didn't see any smoke. The videotape that was taken inside the arena, there was no smoke. And then suddenly, within 30 to 45 minutes, we started getting these reports of multiple dead, and yet nobody who was inside the arena saw anything of the sort. We saw some people walking out of the arena with minor injuries, and then it kind of fits together where they said it was in the foyer of the arena outside, and that's when the arena finally came out a short time later saying, no, it was not inside the foyer, it was not in the lobby area, it was outside by the box office area, and that's where the explosion was. And those witnesses on the outside could clearly see in, and they were stating they saw a number of bodies on the ground, they saw a number of people who were injured and wounded in this thing. And as you say, Shep, the hospital started seeing these shrapnel wounds of victims coming in, which is an indicator that this was some sort of a suicide bomb, possibly packed with nails. It's interesting because when the second report came out of the second device in that same area, it kind of goes back to what we saw in Turkey at the airport there and at Brussels, where one is to kill as many people as possible, but one device also is a diversion where it pushes as many people as you can to another area, and then there's a second explosion. And that was the fear that police had here, is maybe there were two devices, and one was to get as many people as possible and push them in a different direction, and then you have the second explosion. But as we reported, that second device turned out to be only a bag full of old clothes. But you know, as what happened, the Paris attacks and the Bataclan and the arena and so forth a couple of years ago, there will be a number of reported devices, and they'll check those out throughout the evening in Manchester. Again, this is the way the reporting goes. Theresa May, of course, just tweeting, this is big for politics because she was hoping to gain a majority in the upcoming midterm elections there. That looks like it may not happen, and it's yet to be seen if this is a result of that. So as you continue going forward here, the big emphasis is on who will claim responsibility, and so far, as to our knowledge, nobody has. 30 minutes away from, we believe, a press conference that will give us a lot more information coming out of Manchester. But the news continues to trickle out, Shep. We should note that this was filled with teenagers. This area was filled with teenagers. We do not yet have any type of a breakdown of those who were killed and injured, what their ages might have been. And as we believe they were leaving the arena, those people, because the show had just ended. It's unclear if the box office was open at that time. We know that Ariana Grande is having a Thursday concert, so it's unclear if the box office was open and people were there purchasing tickets for another show. These are things that we'll look for in the press conference that is coming just minutes from now.
Indeed it is, Trace. Thanks so much. Just 18 minutes now from that scheduled news conference. The British Prime Minister Theresa May, mentioned by Trace just now, has just issued a statement. The Prime Minister responded as follows. We are working to establish the full details of what is being treated by police as an appalling terrorist attack. Our thoughts are with the victims and the families of those who have been affected. If this is in fact a terror attack, as authorities believe it is, it would be the worst on UK soil since July of 2005. There have been a half dozen terror attacks in London since 2005, resulting in hundreds of injuries and dozens of deaths. It was July 7th of 2005, a coordinated series of suicide attacks in central London, in which 3 bombs exploded on underground trains and 1 double-decker bus exploded. A total of 52 people killed, 700 injured. The bombs were detonated by 4 British Islamist terrorists. In July 21st of that same year, so 2 weeks later, 4 more bombings unconnected with those earlier in July were attempted. However, they failed to detonate. Then 2 years later, in June of 2007, 2 unexploded car bombs discovered in London. May of 2013, a British Army soldier attacked and killed near a Royal Artillery barracks in southeast London. That's the one that happened on this same date 4 years ago. Then December of 2015, a man with a knife stabbed a number of people at a subway station, shouting, quote, "This is for Syria," unquote. Then October 20th of last year, police conducted a controlled explosion of an explosive device after a passenger spotted an unattended bag filled with wires and an alarm clock aboard a train line. No injuries reported, and a suspect was later detained. The media and government of the day referred to the event as the most serious incident on the tube or on the subway station since the July 21st attempted bombing. And then in March of this year, March the 22nd, 5 people, including a London police officer who was stabbed and the alleged assailant, were killed in a terror attack that saw more than 40 people injured outside the British Parliament building in an act described as a, quote, sick and depraved, unquote, by the British Prime Minister Theresa May. And then tonight, this, outside the concert hall, at the entrance to that concert hall in Manchester, thousands of young kids and, of course, others there to hear Ariana Grande, the U.S. pop sensation, continue her tour in the United Kingdom. The explosion happened, believed to be a suicide bombing. 19 confirmed dead and more than 50 confirmed injured. The city concilier there, Pat Carney, told the BBC 5 radio that the arena was, quote, the very easy target, quoting, a concert hall where young people are enjoying music and nobody would contemplate anything like this would happen, he said. Everyone in the city is in shock, having seen how young some of these people are. Our thoughts are obviously with their families. New information coming in live now from Sky News in Great Britain. Let's listen.
As Ariana Grande was singing her last song, which was Dangerous Woman, my daughter was tired and she needed the bathroom, and she said, can we just go outside now? And so we did. We went to the bathroom and then we said, let's go now before the rush. So we walked towards where the MEN car park is, where we were parked, and there was a row of stewards stood in a line, stopping us getting through, but they were very friendly, and they said, "This isn't your best way, girls. You're best turning round. You can get to your car park that way." As I turn round, boom, one loud noise. And then for the first 10 seconds, we thought about it, and we just walked with haste, and then a gentleman said, "Run!" So we ran, and we walked we walked quickly down the stairs. That's when people were flooding through the concert doors, and the sound was definitely coming from the main foyer, where the guests normally enter through and present their tickets. On exiting the building, we then saw crowds of people and children devastated. We went to the car, which was 10 seconds away. As soon as we got to the car, you could smell the burning. Coming out then was quite a fluid operation. There were people around us. The children were devastated. We could see police running in front of our car, people, emergency services with huge red backpacks on them running into the building. But we did manage to get away, all within about 3 or 4 minutes. But it was devastating.
Did you see anybody yourself who'd been injured, or were you too far away from that foyer area that you were describing?
Didn't see anybody, just traumatised people, but you could smell it. And to confirm, we only heard one explosion.
And one of the early witnesses there talking to Sky News in the last hour and a half or so. On the phone with us now is Erin McDougall. She was at the concert. Erin, thank you for joining us. What did you see and hear?
Hi. It was in the venue. I only heard one explosion as well, but we were luckily on the far side, so opposite from where the explosion happened. It was just a big rush. It feels like a big blur now, but we just heard one big floor-shaking explosion from the left side of the hall, and then just everybody running in the opposite direction in one big mass. It was just horrendous.
Did people around you seem to have any sense for what had happened? Because we heard of this announcement or in the early going that everything was okay, that it may have been balloons and chairs falling.
Yeah, I initially thought it was like a door being slammed, like a big concert hall door, but it wasn't. Everybody jumped to the conclusion around me that it was a bomb, and I was trying to stay calm, but when we got out, it was pretty obvious that it was a bomb just by the smell and the carnage of people running around.
You saw injured people?
I didn't personally see anyone injured, just a lot of people panicking and running. I feel terrible for anybody who got caught up in that, though. Erin
McDougall on the line with us. Erin, I know that the main entrance in the foyer where they sell the tickets, that's the area, generally speaking, where this happened. Were you sent out a different exit?
Yeah, we were, like, opposite from that. We got out of a different exit, but the way the venue is shaped, we had to go past where the bomb exploded anyway just to get out. So the security diverted us all one way.
What were you able to see in and around that area as you exited?
Just a lot of smoke, a lot of security, and a lot of crying people panicking, and a lot of young kids just being very scared.
How would you describe the... Oh, I'm sorry for interrupting. Erin, how would you describe the security as you went into the arena for the event?
The security was good. I had my bag checked, and I had to throw out any bottled water or anything I had on me, but I'm not really sure how somebody could get in like that.
Well, we're not even sure that somebody did get in. The reports are varied. Some say it was in the foyer. Some say it was just right outside the arena, and the blast of the explosion came inside. Well, Erin, I should tell you that just about 10 minutes from now, 2:40 local time there, 9:40 here on the East Coast of the United States, they've moved this news conference, so it's scheduled to begin 10 minutes from now. When you were leaving that area, Could you tell just by looking, well, this is where it happened, or there is where it happened, or was it much more ambiguous than that?
Well, once we got further out of the venue, it was like, yes, this is where it happened. It happened near the front of the entrance where the ticket stand was. I believe it was where the ticket stand is. I heard that some people were saying it was in the train station, which is adjacent to the venue, but overall, I couldn't really see much just because of how many people were there.
Yeah, we think those reports happened because some of the walking wounded ended up in that train station. It's only, say, a minute walk away, correct?
Yes, it's right next door.
And they shut down those trains in an abundance of caution to make sure if this was terror, it didn't spread. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm glad that you're safe. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Emergency services are still working at the scene of the incident at Manchester Arena, and they've just sent out a tweet in the last minute or so asking the public to avoid the area. As you might imagine, this is an enormous crime scene. With us now is former CIA analyst Fred Fleitz, now a senior vice president at the Center for Security Policy. Fred, in the early going here, there's no really way to know exactly what has happened except to say the police believe a suicide bomber has killed 19 and injured more than 50. It shouldn't be a surprise to us that lone wolves will try this sort of thing. They've been warning us for quite some time.
I think that's right, Shep. I also think we have to be careful not to say things that's not based by the evidence. I think we can guess on who may have been behind this. There's certain things we have to look at. If this was a suicide bombing, that could mean it was part of a terrorist cell that has to be looked into. There has to be signs as to whether this person was radicalized. How was that done? And then there's the possibility that this could have been someone who fought in Syria and came back. There's about 1,000 of these former ISIS fighters who came back to the UK. There's no evidence of that yet, but we have to look at all these possibilities.
Certainly the forensic evidence on scene will give them a lot of information. It was our belief in the early going that they established so quickly that this was a suicide bombing, because if you're an investigator who has done such things, it would become painfully obvious to you, and pretty quickly, right?
I think that's right, and it's interesting that the bombing seemed to take place outside the entrance of the facility, so the bomber would not have to go near security when people were filing out of the event. And that shows a certain degree of planning. And I mean, in my view, Shep, between ISIS terrorists and homegrown terrorists, I don't see a big difference here, because we know that ISIS tries to either direct or inspire acts of terror if, in fact, ISIS was behind this.
And as you've said so dutifully, we have no way to know whether it was ISIS. I can tell you that we've just gotten a dispatch from the authorities there, from the Manchester Fire Department, quoting crews still supporting the ambulance services at the scene of this horrific incident. Please don't call 999 unless you really need us. It's 999 over there in the way that it's 911 over here. Manchester Fire goes on. Our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone affected, and especially the families who lost their loved ones tonight. Utterly heartbreaking. And it is. You mentioned this idea of security and where you put it. You know, if you go to certain airports overseas, and I remember visiting a couple not that long ago, where the security cordon is away, for instance, at airports, it's away from baggage handling. You get a screening before you even take your bags in. But what the authorities have told us is no matter where you put the screening, you can always have the bad guy in that location. And tonight may be one of those examples. If in fact this person couldn't get in the arena, he or she could have waited until, well, that everybody was leaving, and that was the time frame on this tonight. I guess what I'm trying to say is no matter how hard you try, this sort of thing, it can be moved. It can't be stopped.
That's right. I mean, where do you end the security cordon? In a free society, we can't protect every inch of a city, but there may have been a security failure. This individual may have been on a terrorism watch list. That's something we have to look at.
Indeed. A live witness information coming in from Sky News in the UK. This is live. Let's listen.
He came in and showed me the phone and showed me, like, it's on the news that the bombs actually happened.
And so you look over the steps at the back. When you looked out of the window, describe to me exactly what you saw.
The first second when I looked out the window, I was seeing about 5 ambulances behind each other going towards the arena, and then behind that there was about 6 police cars and about 6 riot vans, but that was obviously going towards the front of the arena. where Victoria Station starts, and there was a few police cars and ambulances at the back where the car park starts.
Did you see any? What happened next? What did you see next?
After that, I just thought it has to be something serious if there's that much like emergency service coming to the actual scene. So then when I seen all that, I looked on my phone on the news and I actually seen a picture of someone that they uploaded on Facebook, I think it was, and they seen smoke coming from the top of the arena, which made me think that's more than just a speaker blowing up, which people was presuming it was.
And when you looked out the window, did you see anyone coming out of the arena?
As soon as I looked out the window, there was people outside my house, apartment, and people was hugging each other, crying, and they had these big pink balloons that obviously was appearing in the arena because Ariana Grande was wanting them. But there were people crying, so I thought there must be something serious and there must be some like faith, like really deaths or something severe.
Did you see anyone injured?
I didn't see anyone injured, but I seen people running towards my house, which is away from the arena, which is going down towards like south of Manchester. So it was kind of like there must be something serious if people are running away from that direction.
Steve, thanks for talking to us.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time. Steve Crosby there, whose apartment just backs onto the arena. I'm just going to show you the scene here. Down through the main square, past the tram platform, we can see a police car, which is a police van, which is parked across the road. Then beyond that, some ambulances. Now, just beyond that to the left, that's the Printworks. Anyone who knows Manchester, that would have been very busy, bars and pubs and a cinema. And just to the left of that is the arena. Just talking to Steve Crosby there, he said that he heard the bang at 25 to 11, and that tallies with what a lot of eyewitnesses have told us, that concert ended at around about 10:30. As the lights went on, people were starting to leave, and they heard the bang, the explosion, and some people described hitting the ground and leaving, and other people described just the melee, the chaos of trying to get out of the arena. We can see some people crossing, trying to get through this police tape. And excuse me, would I be able to have a quick chat about, were you at the concert?
Let's get back to former CIA analyst Fred Fleitz, who's here with us now as Senior Vice President at the Center for Security Policy. You were saying earlier it's important not to get ahead of ourselves and find out what we're working with before you move forward. But certainly they'll reconsider how things are done and how much security precaution they're taken. The difference, for instance, in my recent travels to Paris and Rome versus England, the differences are significant. Long guns at places where lots of people congregate in Greece. In Paris, very heavy security. In London, it's frankly quite different.
That's exactly right. I mean, the British have been better, but frankly, they have been lucky, I think. They have not been the subject of terrorist attacks like this so far since 2005, as you were saying earlier. But one thing we see in all these attacks, all too often, the attacker was known to the police and the security services. And if that's the case here, there may be an intelligence failure that needs to be tracked down.
Well, I guess we'll know. I guess we'll know soon enough. Again, we're expecting just a couple of minutes from now the first live sort of organized news conference to come to us, where we believe authorities are going to give us the exact of what they have so far, of what they can release. Fred, how much consideration should there be toward security, for instance, in the early morning? It's 20 minutes before 3 o'clock in the morning. The morning rush begins in London in 2.5 hours. How much concern about A, a copycat, or B, that this might be part of something larger?
I think the British have probably already done that, because this is something that we know ISIS and Al-Qaeda have tried to do before. They've tried to have multiple terrorist attacks against a particular subject just when people thought the coast was clear. So I imagine there's going to be extremely tight security tomorrow throughout the UK.
Yeah, I'm sure there will. It's so good of you to be here at this late hour. I appreciate it. We're getting a live report from Sky's correspondent on scene. Sky News is the Fox News sister network for the United Kingdom and across Greater Europe, with whom we work very closely. Let's listen.
Where the seating is, and then you leave, rather like a football stadium, into a series of networks of tunnels which go up and down steps and then out into the fresh air. Now, something happened within that
middle ring, which is actually public land, and that is where we're told the explosions happened, or explosion. We're not quite sure yet, and so there's still some information to pick through about exactly the chronology of how many people were out at the time where the explosion happened. Now, around an hour ago, there was a controlled explosion not far from here, just around the corner at Manchester Cathedral. Very loud bang. We were warned about it. That turned out to be some abandoned clothing in a bag. Of course, heightened state of anxiety, heightened state of security. The bomb squad were called in, sniffer dogs were called in, and that package was dealt with, and it was deemed to be nothing. The fear, of course, that it was some kind of secondary device. It wasn't. When I was driving into Manchester, there was an abandoned car on the crosshatches. We've got some pictures, perhaps, that we can show you. A car that had been abandoned on the crosshatches of a crossroads. Again, it looked very suspicious. They called the police dogs in. They went inside. There was a huge amount of security around the car. Everyone was being moved back. That car was cleared. So there have been some incidents connected to this which could have been much more serious than they turned out to be. I'm just going to step out again and just try and get Andy just to go in as tight as he can, just to show you the police van. The ambulances have moved now. What we've seen in the last hour or two is lots of ambulances, sometimes 5 or 6 at a time, going into the cordoned area and then leaving again to one of the many hospitals around the city of Manchester.
Nick Martin.
New word, a few new items to bring to you. These items are brand new. First, from the governor of New York, Governor Cuomo's office, Andrew Cuomo, quoting, "I am heartbroken by the horrific explosion in Manchester, and as a precaution, state law enforcement will step up security and patrols." With history as our guide, the subway stations, the train stations, the bus congregation areas, the Port Authority bus terminal, and others here in New York City will have heightened security. If nothing else, just to let you know, we're on this. We're busy and at work, and I'm guessing that big cities across the nation at heavy mass transit systems, you might see the same sort of thing. I've also gotten an interesting bit of information from the BBC, Radio Manchester, which gave us an idea of this smell that we've been hearing. Quoting now, "We came out of the arena near the station. The explosion went off. You could see people running down the stairs." She says, "I grabbed my sister's head and ducked her down into the chairs because I could see hundreds of girls running down the stairs and there was no way out. I rang my boyfriend saying, I don't know what to do. And he said, try to get out as quick as you can. We got into the foyer and there was smoke everywhere. And listen to this. It smelt of dirty gas. I can't describe it. I don't know what it was. When we finally got out of there, there were people lying everywhere. They had bandages on their heads. My 12-year-old sister grabbed onto me and said, I love you. It was horrible." So a smell of fuel and these reports of shrapnel-type injuries. All of this points to some sort of suicide bomber, which U.S. officials have now said, not officials in Great Britain, but U.S. officials working in coordination with their United Kingdom counterparts, saying now that they believe this was a suicide bomber. Do we have that newspaper cover? Bat 4 for those in the studio, for those in the control room. This is the cover of the Manchester Evening News. Terror at the arena, at least 19 killed in blast horror. Teenagers flee in panic from gig. Police treat explosion as terrorism. Manchester's night of agony. And this paper is being printed now 17 minutes before 2 o'clock in the morning. And this is all at 10, before 3 o'clock in the morning. Their Eastern time +5 now as British summertime is kicked in. So in Great Britain, 5 hours ahead of us here on the East Coast. And the morning paper, which is titled, actually, the Evening News, the Manchester Evening News, out with a special edition. NBC News has been leading a lot of the reporting tonight and has had from a U.S. officials, briefed by UK officials. This is according to the reporting. It's tweeted out by Nightly News. U.S. officials briefed by UK officials say forensic evidence, including a body, indicate it was a suicide bombing attack in the Manchester area. So we've had this reporting, multiple sources, but this is the most definitive coming from NBC News. U.S. officials briefed by UK officials say forensic evidence, including a body, indicates suicide bombing at the Manchester arena. We have no reports of any organization claiming responsibility for this. It would be very early for us to begin to ascribe this to any organization for many reasons. The first of which is we don't know the facts yet, and news organizations should not get ahead of those facts. We can tell you about some dates. There was 4 years ago today, there was an attack in southeast London that was related to events in Syria. At any rate, that attack holds a special date, I suppose, 22 of May. For some, and it has been suggested by none other than one of President Trump's advisors that this could be related to that. Sebastian Gorka tweeted a while ago, Manchester explosion happens on the 4th anniversary of the public murder of Fuseli Rigby. Dates matter to jihadi terrorists, and he could be right. It also comes 30 hours after President Trump's call for uniting against terror forces in a speech in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, as the president is on an overseas trip. Nothing official from the president or his entourage tonight or this early morning now in Jerusalem, where the president is. He was with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at an event last evening and certainly the middle of the night there, and nothing from the president at this hour. But we were expecting this news conference to happen just a short time ago, which has been slightly delayed, and understandably so. We believe that they'll give us this confirmation that they are now under the working suspicion that this was a suicide bomber. If they have an idea about origin, Trace Gallagher, maybe we'll get to something like that. But at this point, that would be left for speculation, and we don't want to engage in that, Trace. Trace actually working to get some new information together. I should tell you the British Prime Minister, we've just gotten this in, the British Prime Minister Theresa May will chair a meeting of the government's Emergency Cobra Committee tomorrow morning, or this morning, I guess, in the United Kingdom. A statement has come out from 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister's residence, confirming that police are currently treating the incident as in the Manchester arena as, quote, an appalling terrorist attack. They are working on that at the moment. I should tell you that the mayor on City banding together, the official Twitter account for the mayor of Greater Manchester is now indicating the following: follow Missing Manchester and Room for Manchester, demonstrating the true spirit of our city in the face of such a devastating tragedy. Trace, they're banding together, getting hotel rooms together, people offering up their homes for people who were there. A real show of community spirit, Trace.
It is, Shep, but the heart-rending part of this whole thing is that you now look online, and we certainly won't show them because there's been no confirmation, but you look online and you have families that are now looking for young children as young as 6 and 7, 8 years old who have not been in contact with their parents yet, and this is some 2.5 hours after the incident. So that's always very troubling when you see these kinds of things going on. Again, we spoke earlier about the number, 19 dead, 50 wounded. We think that might be adjusted upwards, the number of wounded, that is, as time goes on. We don't have any type of breakdown, nor has anybody even intimated the type of breakdown that might be with the people who were on scene who might have been injured and killed in this as far as ages go. What we certainly do know is that Ariana Grande, she attracts a vast number of children, of young girls between the ages of 6 and 20 years old. So that was, according to many witnesses, that was the lion's share of the audience were young children, mostly young girls, and now you're seeing these reports coming out about them being involved, or at least them being missing. And again, we would never show them until it's confirmed, but just the thought that you're a parent right now in Manchester and your young daughter is missing has got to be excruciating. You keep going through the evidence here, and then you have all these similarities or these comparisons to previous terror attacks and what the intent might be here. And as you noted earlier, Shep, there has been no call. There has been no call for responsibility on this terror attack specifically, but we expect during this news conference that is now some 10 to 12 minutes late, we expect that there will be some information coming out about more concerning the suicide bombing you're talking about. We didn't confirm it because U.S. officials kind of were a little iffy on it in the early hours, but now it comes out that you had these hospitals, there were shrapnel wounds, that there were clearly nail wounds that showed that this was some sort of nail-type bomb, and now you have U.S. officials telling multiple news organizations they do believe this was a suicide suicide bomber, and right now we believe it was only one suicide bomber. Those who have not joined us in the last 30 or 40 minutes and heard about a second device or the potential of a second device, one was exploded. It made a loud boom. They told people not to be concerned about it. It turned out to be nothing but a bag of abandoned clothing, and of course we might see more of that. And you talk about the injured being killed, or the injured and killed being hit by this bomb, and there's also a video where you see inside the arena there was great panic inside, and there were people being trampled inside this arena because of whatever that explosion was outside. They first thought it was on the right-hand side of the stage. They thought it was balloons. They thought it was a speaker that blew. Nobody knew. There was no smoke. You couldn't tell what was going on, but people panicked, and in this climate where you know that terrorism is a real part of life, there was some trampling, and now we know there were people injured. We don't know the severity, injured in that trampling incident, or multiple trampling incidents inside the arena, Shep. So you have the injured coming out inside the arena who were trampled, and of course you have the dead and the injured that were outside by the ticket box office between the train station and the Manchester arena. Shep.
Trace Gallagher live with us. Trace, thanks so much. Remember, this happened 10:40 p.m. or so, 10:45 British summertime. So that's 5:30 our time, 5:40 our time here on the East Coast. It's been 4 hours, and just moments ago, nearly 4 hours after the blast, the ambulances were still taking injured people away from the Manchester arena. That from eyewitness reporters just outside that arena, reporting in just the last few minutes. BBC correspondent in Northern England spent time in Nairobi and Athens and Wadworth. He's seen a lot here and just reported. Ed Thomas from the BBC. Nearly 4 hours after the blast, and ambulances are still taking injured people away. It has been a horrible night for people there, and the next order of business was to have been a news conference by authorities on scene, and we're still expecting that. It was originally scheduled for 20 minutes ago. They backed it up to 10 minutes ago, and they're just a little bit behind. When it happens, we'll take you there live. In the meantime, the former CIA military analyst Tara Mahler is with us. She's now the spokesperson and senior policy advisor for the Counter-Extremism Project. Tara, you know, when you're looking at this sort of thing, it has all the hallmarks. It certainly looks like. I suppose it could be related to Syria. It could be related to any number of things. But the Manchester police believe they've had an attack tonight, and now they have to figure out who did it, why, and how to stop the next one.
Absolutely. There's a lot right now we know, and there's a lot we don't know. It has all the hallmarks of a terrorist attack. We've had reports that this may have been a suicide bombing. It happened at a large public event, a concert, something we've also seen before, unfortunately, in Paris. We saw here 19 to 20 individuals killed by the attack, press is reporting.